A very good evening, a warm welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. And welcome not, as you might have expected if you've been watching social media, to Embark Restaurant, which is about, 60 or 70 yards from where I am now. Happening at Embark is the start of a rather special celebration of a brand new wine from the De Toren team. No, they haven't finally brought out a white. Instead, it is a single varietal Malbec ensconced in one of those little wooden cages they're awfully fond of. And that is being released and introduced for the first time in Johannesburg this evening. And it's just so big and so much fun and so much happening that it was just a little too noisy for us to host the show with Lisa and her team at Embark. I'll be back there straight afterwards to try some Malbec, and we filmed with Charles Williams and his team earlier on. I think it's a really nice addition to the fairly modest selection of Malbec we have in South Africa, well worth trying. So instead, I'm across the road in Parkhurst at the Blockman, which is the home to terrific steaks, large chunks of red meat, and a really nice wine list. So another one to add to your list of places to try when you're next in Johannesburg. And perhaps you are planning a trip to Johannesburg and you're looking at your diary. Am I free? Well, you certainly won't be free next weekend, because next weekend is a huge one for the South African wine industry. It is the Cape Winemakers Guild Auction, and this is an event that's become not just a social highlight of the year, but an event that showcases some extraordinary wine made by the remarkable people at the top end of the South African winemaking industry. It's also an auction that does a huge amount of good through the work that the Guild does, and we're going to find out about that work from the chair and 4 of his fellow members ahead of what is a new format approach to the auction, full of fun, full of great wine, and full of potential to change lives through the work of the Cape Winemakers Guild. So all that is coming up from the Blockman in Parkhurst in just a moment. Before we do that, though, here's a look at some of the latest wine news. Let's start with this. Now, this is a delivery that put a big smile on my face. Bosinaki Vineyards. You might remember Katarina Bosinaki joining me on the show about a month ago when I did my 4 weeks, 8 shows live from Greece. And I didn't get to taste any of her wine. I just got to chat to her. Now, what was fascinating is that she focuses almost exclusively on just one grape, the Moscofilero, a grape we certainly don't see here in South Africa. Is it one that's going to be joining the South African offering, as Assyrtiko has, and as a couple of others like Zinomavro and Ageriotiko might do? Well, we shall see. I'm going to be tasting all of this, and all of that wine in front of you, with one exception, is Moscofilero. 2 vintages, the 20 and the 21, on the left of your picture, and on the right, a couple of rosés. The one in the middle is Moscofilero with some Assyrtiko, which is a very common and very favored blend in Greece, which gives the fruit and richness of the Moscofilero together with that dry citrus acid ridge of the Assyrtiko. So a really interesting combination. I'm going to be trying all of those, but a big thank you to the team and to Katarina at Bosinaki Vineyards for that delivery all the way from Greece. Much, much appreciated. Then coming up on WineMag, entries are now open. The Cabernet Sauvignon Report 2022, and that is at winemag.co.za. Christian Eads, I think this time being joined by Roland Peents. I think James is joining him as well, James Peterson, judging those particular wines. It's always a big one, the Cabernet Sauvignon Report. What's really interesting is to see how well people from outside of Stellenbosch, always the heartbeat of Cabernet Sauvignon in South Africa, do. People like Restless River, I'm not sure if they'll be entering, but they're making some of South Africa's finest Cabernet Sauvignon at the moment. How will the other areas shape up? Will Stellenbosch lead the way again? And will that apply to Chardonnay, where Stellenbosch is, of course, a fine producer, but this is where places like the Hamiltonada Valley and Elgin tend to come into their own as well. So both of those reports entries are now open. Head over to WineMag, and Christian Eads and his team will be raring to go to do some judging for the 2022 report. And then this is just one I was down in Pick and Pay earlier this week, end of last week, and saw these. We've had them on the show. A guy named Fredericks, who is Andrea and Chris Molyneux's assistant winemaker at Molyneux. And this, I think, is some of the best value wine in the country, but it's also wine with a really nice story to it. The entire Great Heart Company is owned by the staff of Molyneux. This wine comes from exactly the same place as the wine that makes the Molyneux award winners, and gee, they've got plenty of them. The profits all go into the company. Guynor makes the wine. Andrea helps out a little, but it's a lovely homespun project that helps out with the staff, gives them their own company, and it really is a terrific story and a wonderful addition to South African wine. I think the red's only 115 rand. I think the Chenin is even less. So drop in at Pick and Pay. Look out for the Great Heart wine. Drink some great wine and be supporting a wonderful South African wine story as well. Speaking of great South African wine stories, our South African winemakers are revered around the world, making some fabulous wine at ridiculously good prices, and none more so than our members of the Cape Winemakers Guild, the elite of the elite in South African wine. And I have 5 of them joining me on the show this week. This is proper rock star stuff, and I am very excited to say a warm welcome in no particular order other than the first one to the chair of the Cape Winemakers Guild, Gordon Newton Johnson, the much younger and much better looking brother of Bevan Newton Johnson. We also have Samantha O'Keefe, Abrie Beeslar, Johan Malan, and David Sadie. Guys, welcome, and lovely to have you all on the show.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dan. Nice having us.
Well, let's start off with His Almighty Eminence, the Overlord of the Guild, Gordon Newton Johnson. It's a reasonably new appointment. You haven't been in the space for too long, but I'm imagining you're having a great deal of fun. Tell us a bit about, first of all, the honour of being asked to be the chair of the Guild, and then what it's involved for you so far.
Yeah, hi Dan. No, it's been overwhelming to say the least, of kind of being in charge and pretty much bringing the guild out of the COVID period and really into a new era, and getting our events. This is the first year that we've been doing events since 2019, so it all seems like we've been doing it from scratch. But I think it's all been very successful thus far. I've had a great trip overseas with Samantha, and we've done quite a few countries, and it's been awesome to go just meet all our buyers out there and really get an idea of how they perceive the guild. And yeah, hopefully we can take a few things from that and take it into the future. But yeah, really excited for the auction next week. It's been a lot of work. There's been a lot of things behind the scenes that have been done by some great people to make it all happen, and we're really excited to establish it as a real highlight of the year.
I think most people will have a fairly good idea as to what the Guild is and the work that you do. But for those who aren't overly familiar or maybe just need a refresh, give us a sense of what the Guild is, what it means, and what the work is that you do.
Well, so the Guild started in 1982 with 8 independent small winemakers wanting to inspire each other and share ideas to get the best out of each other. And that's pretty much how it stayed. We're up to 42 members at the moment that we get together. We have technical tastings, we share ideas, and we're always in contact with each other. And the other aspect of it is really giving back to the next generation that's about to come into the wine industry. And I think closest to our heart would be the Protege Program, where we take qualified winemakers from various backgrounds from all over the country and take them under our wing, have them train with some of the best winemakers in the country, and really setting them up to go and do their best out there in a real tough environment in the international world. So it's for us a real privilege to be doing it, and we're seeing the results of it coming out, and I'm sure you're going to see a lot of new winemakers making their mark very soon.
It's such a great platform, and it's one that allows you to make a huge difference with plenty of like-minded people. You mentioned one of them in Samantha O'Keefe. I need to check quickly, Sam. I've checked online over the last couple of weeks. I now think there are 4 of you, based on everywhere you seem to have been over the last few weeks, promoting and celebrating South African wine in general, your wine in particular. Where are you at the moment? I think we just have you on mute there, Sam. All right, we'll get back to Sam in a moment. I think just one or two little connection issues. I think she's back in Drayton after her world travels. It's a guild that includes all of the great names of South African wine over the years, one of whom is making his last vintage for the guild, is his last auction after many years. Johan Malan, it's lovely to have you back on the show in a slightly bittersweet moment, celebrating the final wine for the auction, but also great career both in South African wine and with the Guild. Take us back to your very start with the Guild and what it meant when you started to become a part of it, and how you've seen the Guild grow from there.
Thank you, Dan. I just had to make the calculation that after the 8 guys started the Guild in 82, I joined in 1985. So if that adds up, it's close to 27 years. And over the time, I think the Guild has really grown. The auction started in 1985, and I think that was a whole new episode and a platform for the winemakers to display their wines, and especially wines that are different and setting new standards of quality. So the auction started relatively small, and it wasn't something that was done before, apart from the Nederburg auction, but they always concentrated on well-matured, much older vintage wines, and the Guild wanted to make special wines that you could only buy at the auction, and were supposed to be of younger vintages so that the buyers can benefit from the value or the quality that is added over time. And I've seen through the years how the different styles of wine have become popular, and then something new starts. So it's never been very stable or boring. I think it's always been incredibly dynamic to see how the styles and the new members that come in, they've contributed to keep the Guild very relevant and very young. So it's been a fantastic ride, I must say.
Okay, you've made terrific wine for many years now, Johan, and the reputation you have is stellar. The Guild puts you into a slightly different space as a winemaker. Now you have to make something extra special or a little bit different. What guides you and what has guided you as a winemaker over the years in creating the wine that you feel is the right wine for the auction?
Yeah, I think the style of the wines that are supposed to be auction wines, that has also changed. You know, there was definitely a time, I think 20 years ago, when the big, bold, very oaky, very super ripe wines were the in thing, very much influenced by Robert Parker. And I think that has fortunately moved on since then. So currently, I think the wines are a lot more true to their origins, true to the terroir and the site, and the influence of wood is not nearly as important as it used to be. So I think in that respect, it's more the variety and the origin or the sense of place that is speaking in today's wines. So definitely that has been a huge step forward. And I think the auction and the wines on the Guild auction are always the standard bearers. So you do take notice of the wines that do well at the auction, and also what the consumer thinks of them, because in the end, we don't make wines to win prizes or medals, but it's actually for the consumer and for people to enjoy. And I think they are the final judges, and that has always been a good yardstick to see at the auction which wines are the ones that they go for.
We're going to get a sense next weekend of exactly what the world of wine likes from the auction. And gee, there are some great winemakers who put stuff together, including Sam. Let's jump back to her. I think we have got her back. Are we in Greater at the moment? Have the world travels come to an end, Sam?
Yes, I'm in Greater. Can you hear me?
We can indeed.
Okay, perfect. Hi. Yes, I've spent the last 3 weeks with Gordon and traveling around. We started in Johannesburg and then we ended up in Europe and showing all of the guild wines on behalf of our colleagues. And it was such an honor and it was so thrilling. You know, you never know how things are going to be received. And I felt so proud of how everyone was so surprised at the spectrum of style of wine, the quality of the wine. Every single wine delivered, and it was just really cool. Yeah, I'm tired. I'm happy to be home, but it was really, really cool.
And I suspect that same feeling extends to being part of the guild, which you've now had a little bit of time to be part of, to get used to, get an understanding of. And there have been a huge number of honours for you for Lismore over the last years as your wine has caught on globally. How does being part of the guild, being part of the headline team of the guild now, feature in terms of your wine achievements to date?
You know, being part of the professional.
All right, just having a little trouble with that signal out in Great, and we'll try and get that fixed as quickly as we can. Sam, part of the team.
Here we go.
So to the man who's red wines. Oh, I think we've got Sam. Have you got us there, Sam? No. All right. We'll try again just a moment. Let's nip down to Stellenbosch, where Abrie Beeslar is a regular member of our guest list on Dan Really Likes Wine. Abrie, in terms of the guild, you've been a member for a bit of time now. What's your understanding of where the guild has got to, and the importance of the work that the Cape Winemakers Guild is doing?
Hi guys. It's I haven't been as long as Johan, but I've seen quite a bit of evolution in my time. And I think the styles have become very diverse. I think winemakers South Africa has a very good understanding of what's going on internationally, and also a very good understanding of their own terroir, which is, I would say, in the last 20 years, something has been growing continuously year on year. So which is great. So that allows for a lot of, really, and I don't normally use the word interesting when it comes to wine description, because it's, doesn't really describe much, but it really creates a lot of exciting individual wines that shows the site, that shows the terroir. And I think that's what people can look forward to at the auction, that all of the wines there, and we've tasted through all of them, they are really exciting wines, offering unique experiences that you won't find anywhere else. Even our own wines, when I do the tasting and the selection of the wines, it's individual wines that you put in the bottle, and they're unique, and I think all of us are looking forward to how they present themselves on the auction day next weekend.
You've got a couple of wines we're going to be talking about in just a second. In terms of, to pick up on what Gordon said at the start, seeing these wines not just get out to people to enjoy them and get a chance to taste something really, really special, but where the money that this auction raises is going to that next generation of winemakers. I know that you've mentored plenty of young people, just as you were mentored yourself. How important, Abrie, is it for you personally to be shepherding that next generation of winemakers into the industry?
For me, it's very personal, and everybody that comes through not my hands but through the cellar, I see as a potential player in our bigger industry, and it's so important that you get them going quickly so that they can add value. We don't. Your team is just as strong as your weakest link, and in our game it's the same. So we don't need we can't allow weak links when it comes to winemaking in South Africa. Everybody must be as strong as possible, and we're all responsible to play a part in how quickly we can get them there. So yeah, over the years, I've always been open to get new proteges in and trying to get them going as quickly as possible. And I must say that the program has worked tremendously well. When you look at some of the youngsters now, creating their own brands and standing alone on their own feet, it's just fantastic to see. And yeah, I think we're all proud of that and what we've achieved in a relatively short time.
You, of course, have a lot of experience in this space. For David Sadie, it's all just a little bit newer and a little bit fresher. What's the balance at the moment, David, between excitement at the first auction and just perhaps a hint of nerves, given that it's your very first one?
Yeah, thanks, Dan. It's definitely a bit of nerves as well. It's a big honor to have 2 wines in the auction this year, and to spend time with people around the room, and also the fact that we were able to share these wines and reflect wines from our region based on purity more so than anything else, and still they got accepted, which is an amazing privilege to see how people are actually open-minded to give wines a go if it's about good quality as a base. And yeah, regardless of that, it's been an amazing 1.5 years of spending times at tastings with amazing producers. For a lot of them that I've worked before, being Kevin Arnold at Sarensberg, I've worked a couple of years for Dewald Heinz, and I'm probably missing a few people, but it's been a big journey, a lot of excitement, and also a bit of nerves involved.
Also, I'm sure a little bit of decision making to be done. The others have all got a bit of history in terms of deciding what to make. How difficult was it to come up with the decision on what wine to produce for the auction?
True, I think that was probably when Brouwer Raads nominated me 2 years ago, and was actually my biggest concern because we do such an amount of different single vineyards in terms of what we bottle once a year, and we don't use any new oak. It was a big challenge for me as to the preconceived idea about the historical guild is, would they accept these wines if it was more pure as opposed to wood-driven wines? Not to say that's the current style anymore, but historically that was the stigma about wines that had to be submitted for the auction. So that was my biggest concern, and actually initially why I contemplated joining, because I was quite skeptic as to whether our wines will actually match the profile or fit the profile. So basically what we've done with Chenin, it's a 3-way selection of the current 3 single vineyards we make. We've obviously introduced a 4th this year, but we took a selection of the final wines of the 3 single vineyard Chenins, and we've made up a 300-litre barrel that we've bottled separately. And then for the Grenache, we've done the opposite. We've bottled for the very first time a single vineyard Grenache from the Paardenberg, specifically from Langkloof Valley, which has got a lot of beautiful granitic weathered sand soils. So again, not to redesign the wheel in terms of making something new. I like to stay within the focus of our winery in terms of the vision of working with Chenin and with Grenache, especially red Grenache. But yeah, it was a big challenge initially, and for that argument, I actually contemplated joining or actually taking up the nomination. But reflecting back, I'm very happy and grateful that we did end up being selected, and privileged to be part of this group.
I can feel your excitement. The very first auction as a guild member. It's such a cool weekend to look forward to. You've given us a preview of your wines, which is what I'm leading into for other winemakers. But let's have one more crack and see if the Lone Tower in Greyton is working again. Sam, if we have got you back, let us know where you are and how you're recovering from the last manic few weeks.
Yeah, we had 4 hours of load shedding, so if you lose me again, I'll just say goodbye now. Yeah, I'm recovering. It was really fantastic. As I was saying, it was such an honor to show everybody's wines. As David just very articulately said, I think that the diversity of styles, the diversity of terroir, the diversity of winemaking personalities is really shining through. Every single wine that we showed, people were just thrilled. And so it was was really an honor to be out there, and I feel so excited about the auction next week.
Which, of course, includes 2 of your wines. As I asked David, the challenge of deciding what to make must be considerable. What have you opted for, Sam?
Right when I got the call telling me that because I work with the Syrahs on iron, and it's fresh and it's cool climate and it's floral, and yet it has so much structure because of the iron. And check me out with my props. I actually brought you props, the Sheltering Sky. It's 100% skins in the stem, 15-20% new oak. Beautifully textured, very rich, bright and fresh, though. Really an excellent example of cool climate. And then this year I have the Valkyrie Chardonnay, which is a showcase for my Grayton terroir. And so that's 500-liter barrels on my, there we go, on my soils. So yeah, very, very excited about those 2 wines. A different wine than I had last year. Very cool.
All right, so those are the 2 from Samantha O'Keefe. We've also got, I'm going to jump back to Johan here. We've got this here, and this is, I think, a really appropriate wine with which to say farewell to the auction, Johan. For everybody else, a tough one for both wines. Maybe you tough to choose the second wine, but I think one of them at your farewell auction, Johan, was always going to be a bottle of bubbles.
Yeah, that definitely was the plan, although I never dreamt that this wine that I bottled in 2011 would take so long to come around that I could only be satisfied with it in 2022 to put it on the auction. It was very small bottling. We made just like 1 barrel or 400 bottles, and just to see what Pinot Meunier does on its own, because normally it goes into the Kaapse blend, and we only know about its effect and its contribution to the blend by what we have learned from the French and so forth. So this was our first effort to do a single variety bottling, and the wine just stayed closed and quiet for so long that it was almost at the time when I was about to give up. So over the past 2 years, I saw that there's a bit more development and evolution. So the wine is still incredibly fresh for something that is so well matured and doesn't show a lot of aging. A very low dosage, so that it's got a very dry finish. But low sugar normally means that you get more of the primary fruit. And I must say I learned a lot out of this wine, because essentially the Pinot Meunier is a variety that is used in the blend to open up the wine and to show evolution early on, like 3-4 years. So seeing that it took 10 years or 11 years was a huge lesson, and I think a very exciting wine to do for my last auction.
I think it's the perfect wine to say farewell with. It's not the only one, though. You've also opted for a Shiraz. Talk us through the heirloom that is the other half of your contribution this year.
Yes, the heirloom has been my regular auction wine since 1997. And this is the one wine where I think we also had a huge development and a journey over time. And the more recent vintages saw a lot of changes in the approach to the vinification. Firstly, I think the introduction of whole bunches in the ferment helped to bring out more of the peppery, fine-boss flavors and some of the tannins coming from the stalks. And then secondly, definitely more cautious use of oak. So a wine that is not as big and bold as the heirloom Shirazes of earlier years. So I think also a more focused and more primary fruit, which is what I think we are maybe not at the final answer, but this one is a big step forward for me.
All right. But it's definitely the bubbles that's the headline act, but this is a more than worthy second wine to join it. One of a number of reds on there. The big boys of the reds, though, I think you need to head over to Abrie for. And you've got to here. Talk me, Abrie, about the Paul Sour and putting up there. Here's a wine we know has got 100 points. We know it's revered around the world. Is there a little bit of pressure when you take this Paul Sour name and you stick it up for auction, knowing just what level of expectation there is now around the Paul Sour red blend?
I think we're always excited around auction time, and people are prepared to pay for the wine and what they're prepared to pay. So it's always excitement in the room, and so if somebody hasn't been there, please come and check it out. It's fun and it's exciting. But yeah, with the Paul Sour, every year it's a lot of excitement. And with the 2019 that we have an auction this year, we're very excited. It was such a unique vintage, and the way the wine's presenting itself is something I haven't seen before. It's the lowest alcohol Paul Sour we've made since 1994. So it's really a different wine. You still see that it's Paul Sour. It still has its own characteristic, but there's a refinement on the 2019 vintage that I haven't experienced in my 20 years at Kanonkop. So very excited about it, and I think everybody that tasted it so far, can see what I mean with refinement, and yeah, very delicate but still powerful in the same sense. So yeah, we're very excited how the Paul Sour is going to do. And then we also have a Pinotage 2019 on the auction, which is it has two components, two bush vine components, of which 70% is of vineyards older than 55 years old. Again, these old plants give you a very unique expression. There's a structure to the palate that you don't find easily with younger vineyards. And Pinotage today, I think, is rubbing shoulders with all the best out there. It's only Pinotage this year in auction, if I'm correct, and very excited to see that how they do as well.
I must ask you a question about Pinotage, because it's very much a grape in flux at the moment. The scope of interpretation from bigger, broader, slightly more old school styles to wine that's very light and very delicate and speaks to the two grapes which gave birth to Pinotage many years ago. Where do you see Pinotage at the moment, and what's your thought on the state of the varietal?
Yeah, I think that counts. That comment counts for a lot of red wines in South Africa today. It's such a varied styles out there that and how each winemaker interpret itself. So Pinotage definitely different interpretations. Again, what I mentioned earlier, people are finding specific sites, giving them unique expressions. Some are lighter, some are much heavier. But I think the main focus is that we are creating quality red wine today from Pinotage, and that's the focus. And the Pinotage almost becomes secondary to that. Not that we are not making Pinotage, but the focus definitely on quality red wines, which means structure and balance and elegance, and you'll definitely find that in this wine.
All right, let's head back to His Eminence, the Royal Chair, and no surprises as to which varietals are coming out of Newton Johnson, and by extension, the Hemelanada for the auction. Kick me off with the Pinot Noir to start with. Tell me about this wine, Gordon.
Well, I've got Wind and Sea, which is the vineyard actually right outside my office over here. It's one of the two single vineyards that we've this has been a 15 to 20 year kind of journey, really demarcating these vineyards and finding these vineyards and the characters that they bring. And the way I see the guild wines is I try find a cuvee or a small micro vinification within the vineyard itself. So it might just be that right outside my office window is the eastern part, which I look over every morning, and it's the stoniest part. So that's where we'll go out and we'll do a special picking on the day when we're also picking the rest of the vineyard, but we'll go in with a different set of pickers and just really go look at bunch shape and bunch quality and what we think is really going to do well in the cuvee. And yeah, it's quite interesting. It offers a different expression. It's still Windansea for me, which is usually quite a brooding wine, but this 2020 vintage, it's actually got a lot of upliftment and a lot of the perfume that people would know if they know the Sea Dragon wine. But yeah, I really think that the guild wines needs to have that exclusivity and also allow the winemaker a certain amount of experimentation or just the chance to go look for something more.
I think that's a wonderful aspect of what you guys do with the Guild Auction wines. It's not necessarily wine that you feel is substantially or significantly better than something else, or they quite often are. It's that they've got something unique and there's a character to them, which leads into the Chardonnay. I would have expected your Family Vineyards Chardonnay, a version thereof. I had some of the 2015 last week, and it was an absolute delight. Unfortunately, most of my dinner guests drank the bulk of it, which was very disappointing. You haven't gone that, but again, you've gone something a little different, and this time it's the Sanford Chardonnay.
Yeah, the Sanford. Well, that 2015 that you had also surprised me as well, because I haven't really been looking at it since we bottled it, and I always thought it was perhaps a little bit too big and had a bit of oak when it was young, but the wine's eaten it up and it's showing really fresh. But one of the vineyards that actually goes into our family vineyards is the Sanford vineyard. And if anyone at the winery who's been to our winery, we're basically facing north. So we're the warm slope is where all our vineyards in front of us. But we do have another adjacent farm just across the way where Bevan and myself stay, called Sanford. And it's the southern slope, much cooler. And the Chardonnay over there ripens a lot longer, about 2 weeks later than it does on this side. And Sanford for me has always had this magic mix of soil. We kind of define our wines by the quality of the clay that we have deeper down into the soil. And you know, when we first started preparing that site, it's now 15 years ago, it just looked magical. We knew that something good was going to come out of there, and we've managed the vineyard in our dry land now for these last 15 years. It's one of those vineyards that you're absolutely certain it's going to reach 40 years of being a healthy vineyard. And you know, with Chardonnay, sometimes I think Chardonnay I find quite easy to make. It's easy to make a good Chardonnay. It's quite flexible, but I think it's very hard to make a great Chardonnay. And if something really comes out and really expresses itself and has certain aspects to it that you don't really normally see out of Chardonnay, I think that is quite rare. And that's what I see in our Sanford. It can be quite a rich wine up front, but it's just got that energy and that acidity that finishes it off, that kind of, you know, lifts your soul and wants you to have the next glass, and something that I know is going to age extremely well over time too.
And it can be all yours at the auction next week. Gordon, before I get some thoughts on everybody to wrap up the show with some other wine they might be looking out for, I know things have changed a little in terms of the format this year. How are things working for the auction? How do people get involved?
Well, we are, if you're going to Instagram or Facebook, I think if you're going to the Cape Winemakers Guild, you'll start to find all the posts there, and definitely find your way and easy ways how to register. How it's changed is that, you know, over the past 2 years, we've been forced to go online, not being able to host any events. And, you know, the Guild Auction was always known to be a fun live event. But what it did do, the upside from that, is that it's expanded our international audience a fair bit over the last 2 years, quite exponentially. And it's that kind of accessibility that we want to retain in a live event. So but it also kind of extends the time, and we want to extend the party a little bit. So we're having the auction over 2 days, which will start with our pre-auction tasting at about lunchtime on next Friday. And then we're going to have a shorter session of about 3 hours, 2 to 3 hours of auctioning smaller lots. where all the wines are available, but it'll be the smaller 2K slots and a couple of 4K slots. And that will lead us then into this Saturday, which will go from the morning till hopefully about lunchtime or just after lunchtime, where we will be selling all the wines again, but also with the larger lots. And, this can be followed online. It's going to be broadcast everywhere. So you're able to follow the fun and hopefully have a good time.
Yeah, have absolutely no doubt. The Cape Winemakers Guild website, all the social media channels will point you in the right direction. And remember, it's all for a really good cause as well in terms of the work that the Guild does. We've given you 5 of the winemakers. We've given you their wine. Before we go, let's get a word from each of them on some of the other wine they might be looking out for. David Sadie, let's start with you as the new man on the scene. A couple of wines from some of the other winemakers that you just absolutely love to get your hands on?
Yeah, being Chenin Blanc obsessed, I would definitely love to recommend the Hope Chenin from Sebastian Beaumont. The linearity and acidity profile and a bit of phenolics and tannin that he makes use of is quite a beautiful example as a backbone wine for the Hope Marguerite. So it's definitely a wine I would invest in. And then I think it's the Stella Nova Cabernet Franc from Brouwer. It's also, again, linear in my opinion, acidity focused and beautiful tannin. And I just love the purity of both wines. So, I mean, amongst a couple of wines, actually a lot of wines, those two I can easily recommend.
Sebastian Beaumont and Chenin Blanc, Brouwer Arts and Cabernet Franc. You'll struggle to go wrong with either of those. What are you, Brouwer? Is it a strictly red wine diet, or is there a white or two you might be looking out for as well?
Sorry, Dan, who was that question to?
Sorry, to Abrie. I might have said Brouwer by mistake. My apologies, Abrie.
I'll act on Brouwer as well. Just to let you know. So no, I'm also like I said, there's a lot of really beautiful wines this year in auction. I have to mention, the Max from Miles Mossop. It's a beautiful expression of that red blend, Cabernet-based blend. A fantastic balance, and that is my style of wine that I enjoy. It's world class, and that can stand on any table anywhere in the world, and it will compete with the best out there. And then the other two wines I really enjoyed. I like the Blanc Cabernet from Mornay Frey. He's also, I think, makes beautiful wines. Elegance that he finds in his Cabernets are just exquisite, and there's a refinement to the wine that's beautiful. And then I also, just to throw a white in there, I think Bartu Extien's Vloekskoot Sauvignon. I'm not a big Sauvignon Blanc drinker myself, but on when we tasted through the wines, that wine really made an impression on me. And again, I think it was just a flawless wine with the expression of Sauvignon that you don't find every day in South Africa. So all of them world-class wines, but there's much more. So come and support the auction and enjoy these wines.
It really is a ridiculous selection of world-class wine from world-class winemakers. Let's have a look and see if we've got world-class internet in Greyton and nip back to Sam if she's there. Sam, if you can hear us, if you are online, a couple of the other wines that have caught your fancy?
I hope I'm here. Andrew Molyneux has a Semillon Gris, and it's always something special, but this year I think it's exceptionally floral and just really knocks it out of the park. And I would say special mention for Niels Verberg and his Opa Mourvèdre, because he learned that the Mourvèdre that's directly from his farm, dryland farmed on Ledeye, was chosen for a Guild auction wine. And the next phone call, he learned he was going to be an Opa. So I think that's a super special wine this year.
It's a lovely, lovely story. I really like that. Niels, of course, one of the great characters of South African wine. Mr. Chair, if we can cross back to you, what are two wines, Gordon, that you think we should be having a look out for next weekend at the Guild auction?
Was the last one to talk. A couple had taken my favorites already, but don't worry, there's plenty more. I'm actually liking David Trafford's Perspective, which is Cabernet Franc based. I also agree with Abrie. I mean, I think these Cabernet Franc wines, Cabernet Franc has come such a long way in the Cape in the last decade or so. And with David, what you see is what you get. You know, he's always such he's so magnanimous with any kind of praise that you put on him. But his wine is just, I think, pure, authentic. You know, I kind of know his style and know his cellar, and he gives a lot of flavor. But for me, just a pure and authentic wine. On the other hand, I think I'll stick with a classic Chardonnay. I'll stick with my neighbor Kevin Grant. Always producing top stuff. He produces it in his black style of Chardonnay, where he oxidizes the juice quite a bit, which is what we do with our wines as well. But he takes it to another level, and I think it's going to be a super wine to taste long into the future as well, by oxidizing the juice and creating the freshness afterwards with the fermentation. It's going to lock that wine in for many years to come.
And before I get a final word from Johan as the departing member of the Guild, from you as the current chair, a quick tribute to Johan and what he has done through his platform at Simonsig for South African wine during his time as part of the Guild, Gordon?
Sure. It's difficult. I tried to persuade him to stay because, as Johan was saying earlier, you know, the Guild is all about dynamism, and he is still one of our most dynamic winemakers. He's always learning. He's always trying new things, and I think that's the secret to being a good winemaker, is just pushing your experience and, you know, pushing yourself sometimes into challenges or places where it might be uncomfortable, but that you learn something. And he's still one of those people year after year. And, you know, he's also just such a great soul to talk to. You know, he's got so much to offer. He's got all the time in the world for every single person that he talks to. And no, I think it's a really big hole that we need to fill with the new generation. And we're going to miss him a lot, for sure.
Well, let's go over to wrap up the show to our departing member of the Guild. Before I get a last word on your time at the Guild, Johan, I must ask you about your choices of wine from elsewhere in the selection. If anyone's well placed to know what to look out for, it is you. What are a couple that we should be lining up to bid for?
Yes, thank you, Dan. I just want to cover for the 5 members on the show tonight, because I think we'll be wrapped on the knuckles if we didn't give a few of the details of the auction. It's the 38th Cape Winemakers Guild Auction, and we've been sponsored by Nedbank now for 26 of those years. And this year, the auction will be presented by Strauss & Co. So important that if you want to participate in the auction is to register online at www.straussart.co.za. The registration is already open since the 12th, and you can either buy online or you can attend the auction in Somerset West at the Lord Charles Hotel on Friday afternoon, as well as on Saturday morning, where the wines will also be available for tasting on a Saturday morning. And in total, there are 43 wines, of which there are 14 whites, 26 red wines, 2 Cup Classiques, and not to forget the 2005 Cape Tawny Port from Karel Nel at Boerplaas. Okay, that's a bit of the commercial background, but I think it will guide people in the right direction. When it comes to the wines that I thought were very innovative, the first one that comes to mind is the Artenburg Merlot from Carl Schultz, and that was made in an amphora. Didn't see any wood. Now, Merlot is this notoriously difficult variety, especially because it has a tendency to be green. And I think Carl Schultz has proved to be a master of Merlot when he became Diners Club Winemaker of the Year with this very same variety a couple of years ago. And normally one would think the variety needs a bit of wood, but this is a innovative way, using amphoras, a clay amphora, to make a Merlot. The praises of the Cabernet Francs have already been elaborated on, but there's another wine that I thought was also, it takes a bit of guts and good understanding of Cabernet Sauvignon if you can make a totally unwooded Cabernet Sauvignon. That is the Warren Ellis Cabernet Sauvignon, and he did say in one of his introductions of this wine that the two very famous wines made by George Spiess in 1966 and 68, they were also unwooded, and he did something in a similar style, and I thought he did a really good job of that. So that's the kind of wines that you can find at the auction, not your normal run-of-the-mill. There's always a story behind it, and a lot of knowledge, know-how, and dedication that has gone into it. So that's why people should buy at the auction, because these wines are not available anywhere else, only at the auction, and it's a highlight that you shouldn't miss.
I hope you have been taking notes. If not, always go back and rewatch the show and scribble down the thoughts of our winemakers. Before we say goodbye to you, Johan, all your time with the Guild, it's a difficult question for you. It won't stop me from asking it. Can you pick a memory or two that in your time as part of this remarkable group of wine lovers, which I think is what predominantly defines you, really stands out and helps to articulate what being part of the Guild has meant to you?
I know when I joined up, it was really very early in my career, and I would get to the Guild functions, and Walter Finlayson was then at Blauklippen, and his wife, Jill, she always called me the baby of the Guild. So I'm a very old baby at this stage, but you know, it really shows you that it was a lot about the personalities and how welcome I felt, even though I was really wet behind the ears. That kind of camaraderie and doing the same thing, and but on different sites and soils, but sharing that knowledge and caring about a Guild is about caring about your fellow members. And I think the situation when Samantha had this incredible loss when she had the big fire there, it was evident that the members of the Guild came together to support her. And I think that's the message of the Guild. It's not only about the wine, but it's about the personalities. And of course, what is also plowed back into the industry, helping young winemakers to fast track into becoming better equipped to go and stand on their own feet. The bursaries that we do at Elsenburg and Stellenbosch University, and also training in the industry. The Guild has actually become a very powerful organization in the sense of its social responsibility, which in this country is enormously important. And all of this is funded out of the wines that the members are so generously donating for the various auctions. And I hope it continues for a very long time. Now, it's been an absolute honor. And I can only wish the Guild the very best for many years to come.
Well, it doesn't need me to say it, or Gordon, that you've had a monumental impact on South African wine. It's a swan song of sorts next weekend, but although you're saying goodbye to the Guild as an active auction member, I know there's still plenty more to come from you in terms of South African wine. So, Jan, thank you, not just for being on the show today, but for what you've done with the Guild, with South African wine, with providing great bubbles like the ones at the auction. This 2011 Pinot Meunier, which I've been sampling amongst others this evening, and to Johan, and to Gordon as chair, and Sam as vice chair, and to Abrie as another veteran member, and David with your first auction up. Thank you not just for being part of the show and for being part of the auction next weekend, but for being part of this Guild, which is such an important part of the backbone of South African wine. And I think it says so much about you guys and your fellow Guild members that you don't do this to make wine or to market your wine or to turn it into a commercial aspect. You do it for the love of wine and for the next generation of people coming through. And that is such a big thing for us South African wine industry. So thank you for it. Have a wonderful weekend. I shall be sitting in 7 degrees of Scottish summer. So sadly, I won't be with you, but I'll be watching from afar, cheering on, hopefully buying a little wine, and more importantly, watching a really special weekend in the South African wine industry. So to Gordon, Johan, Sam, Abrie, David, guys, thank you so much, and the very best of luck next weekend.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
So head over to the Cape Winemakers Guild website or their social media channels, keep updated. And if you can't be at the auction at the Lord Nelson in Somerset West next weekend, then Strauss Art is where you need to be to register and be part of an auction that'll give you some splendid wine, but also send support to the wine community at large and ensure that more great winemakers keep flooding into South Africa and upholding the fine tradition we have of making some of the world's finest wines. On that note, I'm off to drink some more fine wine across the road at Embark with Charles and the team at De Toren and their brand new Malbec. I'll report in on that on the show on Thursday, when I'll be drinking a little champagne with my friend Greg Maloka and Lou Ruderer and see if any of it is almost as good as Johan Malan's Cup Classique. Thanks so much for being part of the show. This is Dan Really Likes Wine, presented by Pick and Pay. We'll see you back on Thursday. Have a great evening, and make sure, either in person or virtually, you are at the Cape Winemakers Guild, presented by Nedbank, next weekend. Goodbye. To join the Pick and Pay Wine Club, simply SMS your smart shopper number to 36775. It's absolutely free, and you'll get for yourself 3 times the smart shopper points on every bottle of wine bought. You'll also get a 20% discount on 10 different wines each month, a 25% discount on a case of wine, and a Magnum, some terrific competitions and invitations to awesome events.